Why? Happy Monday. I would say it's a glorious Monday, but it's not really a glorious Monday. And I'm not going to be talking about that, what makes it not glorious, until I get more details. And I'm not even sure I'm going to talk about it because I don't want to promote such a terrible act. But we're going to talk about another terrible act that happened a few years ago. A few years ago, here in Austin, Texas, Army Sergeant Daniel Perry was Ubering here in Austin. This was during the George Floyd debacle. Austin wasn't, I guess, spared of the nonsense, and there was some protests. There was some rioting. There was some vandalization. They tried to storm the police headquarters. They shut down 35 twice. There was a unsanctioned march down a major road through downtown. And this is where Sergeant Perry comes into the picture, where I don't know if he wasn't paying attention. I don't know what his mindset was. I don't know what he was doing with in his car. But as he was going downtown, he notices a crowd in front of him and he swerves and goes towards the curb. And the mob being the mob is, they were zombified. They stormed the car and he defended himself. Cops ruled it as a justifiable self-defense. Our DA gets elected, wants to make an example, and charges him with murder. I don't know if the grand jury indicted him or not, or if he circumvented that with an obscure law that allows the DA to do that. But needless to say, today is a day that the trial starts. Trial in the death of Austin protester Garrett Foster begins. Was it self-defense or murder? Garrett Foster marched with hundreds of fellow protesters along Congress Avenue nearly 3 years ago. An AK at his side and a family friend says he carried to protect themselves and others from possible attacks. Army Sergeant Daniel Perry was in Austin that night from Fort Hood, armed with a 35 or 357 Magnum in his Hyundai Ioniq. I don't know what that word is. That ferried his Uber passengers across the city. Momentary encounters between the two men in the heart of downtown in July 2020 left Foster death from the bursts of gunfire and Perry charged with murder. Whether Perry fueled by anti-protester beliefs provoked by the shooting by driving into the crowd, or whether Foster pointed his rifle at Perry and Perry fired in self-defense, is the heart of much anticipated trial. The set begin Monday, which is today, at Travis County Criminal Court, the highest profile case to go before a jury since the start of the pandemic. This case is one of the most significant that the district attorney Jose Garza has handled since taking office in January 21. Ryan Foster, Garrett Foster's younger brother who lives in Colorado, told American Statesman that the trial has been way too long in the coming. The case continues to galvanize Austin protesters community that marched in the streets for weeks after the police officer murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis and in May 2020 in the fatal shooting of Michael Ramos by Austin police officer Christopher Taylor. And a month earlier, Taylor, who's been charged with murder of Ramos' killings, is set for trial in May. In Foster's death, the prosecutor and Perry's attorney expected to highlight how firearms escalated the vital friction into bloodshed of Foster's Perry's. The charges against Perry, which include aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and deadly contact, carry a complicated set of facts that will spark the public and legal observers interest and made the trial outcome difficult to predict. It's expected to last 2 weeks. If convicted, Perry faces up life in prison, dishonorable discharge, and yada yada yada. It sounds like a law school criminal law exam question, says Patrick Metz, a Texas Tech University law professor. The facts are incredible. It's going to be difficult for both sides. The case has already sparked a legal scuffle between prosecutors and Perry's attorney. Soon after the grand jury indicted Perry, his attorney accused the prosecutor of misconduct, alleging a biased presentation to grand jurors. I don't like grand jurors for this particular reason. In the grand jury, the DA makes its case. It presents enough evidence to say that there was a crime. It doesn't matter if there was a crime actually committed or not. They just got to present the evidence whether or not a crime is. There's no cross examination, and it's not really based on facts. It's just, do I have enough evidence to indict? And it's very secretive too, which I don't really like as well. But either way, I'm going on a tangent. His attorney accused the prosecutor of misconduct, alleging biased presentation to grand jury that did not give Perry an opportunity to explain his action. An Austin veteran police detective who deemed the shooting justified said the prosecutor instructed him to dramatically scale down his grand jury testimony, compelling him to speak. Garza said his office provided a grand jury with a complete narrative of events. State District Judge Cliff Brown ruled against Perry's legal team in their bid to get the case dismissed. No shocker there. In liberal Austin, California, Texas, attorney Doug O'Connell, who represents Perry, said in a statement, "It's tragic that Mr. Foster died. It's also tragic that Daniel's being prosecuted for what is clearly a case of legal self-defense." And so this is going to be coming down to the actual car and whether or not his intent was to scare the pedestrians, or he just wasn't paying attention because it was a sporadic protest. He was trying to get to the other side, realized that it wasn't happening until it was too late, and swerved and did his best to prevent hitting any pedestrians. That's pretty much what the case is going to come down to, in my humble opinion. Just because you have a right to carry an assault rifle around downtown doesn't mean that it's a good idea. And if you point a rifle at someone, you're responsible for everything that happens next. This is the other crux of the argument right here is, did Foster point the gun at Sergeant Perry? And the witnesses to that is going to be the people that support Foster. So they're going to have a biased view of it. They're probably going to say that he didn't, and becomes a he said, she said scenario. And the jury has to come to a conclusion whether or not that happened or not. The district attorney office said in a statement, "We look forward to our community weighing on this case." A deadly protest, Foster, who is 28, has participated in several Black Lives Matter protests in Austin since they started in May 2020, and often had his rifle with him. His family said issues of racial injustice and the Second Amendment rights were very important to him. Relatives said Whitney Michelle, who was his fiance, a black, Foster was white, doesn't really matter. He was born in Plano and enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in his late teens, but was discharged at 19 to be Michelle's full-time caretaker. She had all four of her limbs amputated when she developed a medical condition due to sepsis. I don't know what that's all about. I'm just going to move on. The couple has been living together in Austin for about 2 years before Foster's death. Perry was a sergeant stationed at Fort Hood when the shooting happened. He's been in the Army for 8 years. His lawyer said that Perry remains in the Army but is no longer at Fort Hood. See, I thought they discharged him because he's non-deployable. But I'm glad that he's still in the Army. Who knows after this is done He may be dishonorably discharged or he'll go back to active duty. Perry, who was working as an Uber driver that night, he killed Foster and did not come to Austin to disrupt was working as an Uber driver that night. He killed Foster and did not come to Austin to disrupt protesters, according to his attorneys. In weeks before the shooting, Perry had railed against social justice marches on social media. At one point, he responded to a post from former President Donald Trump saying that protesters, anarchist agitators, looters, or lowlifes protesting Oklahoma would face a much different scene than protesting in New York or Minneapolis. Perry's tweet reads, "Send them all to Texas and we'll show them way. We say don't mess with Texas." If that's the only two, it's very weak. It's not clear how much Perry's social media posts might have been introduced to the trial. An effort to keep much of the information out of the jury consideration was filed under a seal. Attorney Clint Bronin of Dallas said that the posts have been taken out of context. I say a lot of things on Twitter. A lot of it's in the heat of the moment. Some of it's calculated. A lot of it has to deal with it's online, so no one's going to punch me in the face for saying something stupid. I mean, I'm not saying that as a argument of why he posted it. I don't know the person. I can only speak to myself. The incident started on July 25th, 2020, when Perry was driving on 4th Street of Austin, honked his horn around 9:50 p.m. and turned right onto Congress, where a crowd was marching. Perry stopped and several protesters approached his car, including Foster, who was carrying an assault-style rifle. Police said that protesters had said they feared that they were being attacked by someone in the car. Like I said, it depends on how they could paint the car swerve. Unfortunately, I don't have a video. I wish I could find it, but I didn't. Witness who spoke to the Statesman after the shooting said Foster did not raise his weapon at Perry. Michelle was near Foster when he was fatally shot, but it's unclear whether she will testify in the trial. A question of self-defense. I mean, if you have a zombie mob approaching your car, sure, you're in a car, but a car can only protect you so much. You could drive away, which may have been the correct move, but it's also swarming the car. Just because you're in the car doesn't mean you're safe. If you have other people that have guns, they can shoot through the car and cause you harm. I'm just throwing that in there. Under the state self-defense law, a person is justified using deadly force against another when an actor reasonably believes the force is immediately necessary to protect the actor against the other attempt of use of unlawful force. If they beat up the car, kick the car, and there's a swarm of them, I could see if you just shoot out in the crowd to protect yourself would be warranted. Mez says that Texas has among the most robust self-defense protections of any state, but the law does not permit a shooter to provoke an attack, and that's going to be the crux of whether or not him swerving, honking his horn to avoid hitting people could be considered an attack. Rick Flores, an Austin attorney who has handled a self-defense case, says jury will have to weigh on who acted as an aggressor and who acted to protect himself. Prosecutors may argue Perry acted dangerously towards Foster, suggesting that Foster may have been justified raising a gun at Perry. He said that would turn the self-defense claim on its head. That is something to definitely consider, but Perry's defense team will likely argue that he was justified shooting Foster, as he believed Foster was about to shoot him. A part of the discussion will rest on the position of Foster's gun when Perry shot. It could be that his military training took over. He saw him as a possible threat, neutralize someone with a gun because that's going to be able to reach out and touch someone. A lot of these things have to be considered. I can see where it gets kind of muddy, but I sure hope Perry wins this case. Neither side would discuss evidence that they plan to present at the trial. It's unclear if Perry will testify. Daniel is anxious to testify and tell his side of the story, O'Connell said. Where he actually takes a stand will depend on the quality of the government's evidence. The video evidence of the shooting is limited and does not vividly show the moment that Foster and Perry encountered each other. Prosecutors will rely on witnesses who were there on the scene to describe the event, and Perry's defense will try to undermine their credibility. Expert says so it becomes a he said, she said scenario. Metz said that the complexity of the case underscores the importance of a jury hearing the evidence and deciding whether Perry is guilty or innocent. You have to look at reasonableness, the whole situation, and that is what the jury is for. Either he did kill him in self-defense or he didn't. I'm saying he killed him in self-defense. Whether or not a jury's going to convict him or not, it's a different story. There is the Texan. Jury selection begins at the trial of Army Sergeant Daniel Perry for protesters Garrett Foster's 2020 death. Let's see how much of this is a rehash. Jury selection is underway for the trial of Army Sergeant Daniel Perry, accused of murdering the 28-year-old Garrett Foster in downtown Austin during the summertime demonstrations against police violence in 2020. Travis County prosecutor alleged that Perry, motivated by animus against protesters, unlawfully shot Foster in July 25th, 2020, after Perry navigates onto Congress Avenue where the demonstrations were taking place. It was unsanctioned, by the way, if my memory serves me correctly. A grand jury indicted Perry in 2021 on charges of murder, aggravated assault, and deadly contact. Prosecutors said Perry used his vehicles to threaten another demonstrator. Justin Note with seriously bodily injury. The defendant is being tried on the 140th District Court in Austin, where the Democratic Judge Cliff Brown presides. Perry was freed after turning himself over and posting bail. Perry, who was stationed at Fort Hood when the killing occurred, asserts that he acted in self-defense after protesters surrounded his vehicles and after Foster pointed an AK rifle at him. Travis County Judicial Records says that the trial will formally begin Wednesday morning. Unlike many high-profile criminal cases, Perry trial reportedly will not be live streamed over witness tampering concerns. I disagree with that statement, but okay. During his campaign, Democratic attorney Jose Garza emphasized prosecuting law enforcement for alleged misconduct. His office successfully pursued indictments against 19 Austin Police Department officers on suspicion of using improper force against demonstrations during 2020 protests and riots. I think they were all found not guilty, or they're starting to be found not guilty. One of Perry's defense attorneys, Clint Broden, contended that these charges were politically motivated and that Perry was not given an adequate opportunity to make his own case before the grand jury. Garza denied the accusations during the news conference in 2021, announcing the charges. Grand juries are assembled to determine whether there's probable causes to charge someone with a crime. However, probable charge is a much lower standard than proof than evidence beyond reasonable doubt, which is a standard for a criminal trial. David Fugit, an ATP homicide detective who led the investigation into the killing, accused Garza and his employees of criminal witness tampering for supposedly directing him to exclude exculpatory evidence from his presentation to the grand jury. Garza called Fugit allegations in a positive, unnecessary, and unsupported. If convicted on first-degree murder, Perry faces a minimum 5 years and a maximum of 99 or life imprisonment and a $1,000 fine. Judge could also suspend prison sentences and impose probation, though it would be unlikely in a murder case. Disclosure: unlike almost every other media outlet, the Texan is not beholden to any special interest, does not apply for any type of state or federal funding, relies exclusively on readers' financing support. If you'd like to become one of the people that we're financially accountable, click here to subscribe, and it talks about the author. So Sergeant Perry has to win this case. And now I think I mentioned before, if Perry does lose, it's not an end all for the Second Amendment and self defense, because he did drive into the crowd, but it definitely weakens the self defense clause, definitely weakens the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms to protect oneself. And this is definitely a politically motivated trial. Now, I don't know what the outcome will be. Depends on the caliber of the jury. I mean, if you get some people that believe in he's guilty, then he's going to be guilty. If they're going to look at the evidence and there's enough evidence to convict him, he'll be found guilty. And now, if the prosecutor has a crap case, he'd probably be found not guilty. But if he's found guilty, it's probably going to be appealed and probably go to the Texas Supreme Court, where it's going to die. It's going to be overturned. That is my prediction. Now, it's just my prediction, and I could be wrong. But hopefully in 2 weeks, or a little bit after 2 weeks, we will know the verdict. With that being said, that is my video. Leave a comment down below if you have any thoughts. If you have a link to the video, please send me that link. I might do an update video to show the actual intersection and where he drove into it. That being said, that is my video. Most importantly, have yourself a wonderful day, morning, or evening.